Well, good morning to you here in person, to all the people who are following via the live stream. Congratulations to the valiant people who braved the weather and are here today. So today we are, tomorrow is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And in the past I invited guests to talk on this occasion, but today I thought that we could do something like, which I think takes a lot. I mean, it's not an easy ride to engage with James Baldwin. You're all familiar with him. I suppose that most of the text, especially this one, The Fire Next Time, is familiar to a lot of people in this country because you read it at school. And I discovered James Baldwin, so I started to come to the United States in 2013. It was the first time I came here. Good morning. There is a handout for you if you want, get one. So started to come to this country in 2013, and I have to say that coming from Europe, as you can imagine, a lot of things are different, however much America is similar, as common roots with Europe. And a friend of mine told me to read To Another Country by James Baldwin. And that was the first time reading that novel that I started to understand or to have an idea of how different the issue of race was here in this country as compared to Europe. And since then I've been reading a lot of James Baldwin and always been transformed by it, or at least very much touched by it. So I thought that, it's important to, or rather than, try to go political about the issue, etc., although everything is political in a certain sense, engaging with an author that makes us think very deeply is probably the best way of making sense of what the celebration of Martin Luther King Day Jr. Is supposed to awake in us. So I want to dive into the text. It's going to be mainly reading passages from Baldwin and adding a few commentaries, and then I hope we can have a little kind of exchange at the end. And I'd like you to go straight to the end, start with the last text, which for some reason is labeled number 1, although it's after number 33. Can you see it? I don't know what happens to the numbering with Word. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Please get a handout. So, and I'm going to read the text as it is. If there is any word which is not comfortable, I'm quoting, okay? So, Baldwin says, "The American Negro has a great advantage of having never believed the collection of myths to which white Americans cling. That their ancestors were all freedom-loving heroes, that they were born in the greatest country the world has ever seen, or that Americans are invincible in battle and wise in peace, that Americans have always dealt honorably with Mexicans and Indians and all other neighbors or inferiors, that American men are the world's most direct and virile, that American women are pure. Negroes know far more about white Americans than that. It can almost be said, in fact, that they know about white Americans what parents, or anyway mothers, know about their children, and that they very often regard white Americans that way." You see already strange territory here. And perhaps this attitude, held in spite of what they know and have endured, helps to explain why Negroes, on the whole, and until lately, have allowed themselves to feel so little hatred. The tendency has really been, insofar as this was possible, to dismiss white people as the slightly mad victims of their own brainwashing. I'm at text page 6, so towards the end, so that you find. One watched the lives they led. One could not be fooled about that. One watched the things they did and the excuses that they gave themselves. And if a white man was really in trouble, deep trouble, it was to the Negro's door that he came. And one felt that if one had had that white man's worldly advantages, one would never have become as bewildered and as joyless and as thoughtlessly cruel as he. The Negro came to the white man for a roof, or for $5, or for a letter to the judge. The white man came to the Negro for love. Now, this is really like, I've been like, honestly, battling with this sentence, trying to understand what Baldwin wants to say. But he was not often able to give what he came seeking. The price was too high, he had too much to lose. And the Negro knew this too. When one knows this about a man, it is impossible for one to hate him. But unless he becomes a man, becomes equal, it is also impossible for one to love him. So, the white man came to the Negro for love. I mean, this is really a sentence, and my invitation is really, I gave you a number of passages. If you can't read the text, just meditating on these extracts, I think, and trying to wrap your mind around them, is really something that takes you into a territory where you really have to question yourself quite deeply. Now, I'll tell you how I understand it, having thought about this, but I will really be interested in hearing what you think about this. But as I understand this in the context of the Fire Next Time, what white people in this context were looking for was an attestation of innocence. So it's basically going to the people who they knew they had, persecuted in all possible ways, and trying to come up with a sense of exoneration. Okay, so yes, this has happened, but it was not me. Yes, this has happened, but it was complicated. Yes, this happened, but the history was different. It was a different time, etc., etc. So, the way I understand this, and is only a part of it, is what the white people were looking for was an attestation of innocence. And innocence is a huge category, as you know, in the Fire Next Time. So if you would, please, let's go back to number 1 at the beginning of the essay. So this is part of the letter James Baldwin writes to his nephew, which is the introduction to the Fire Next Time. And he says, these are quite harsh words, "This is the crime of which I accuse my country and my countrymen, and for which neither I, nor time, nor history will ever forgive them, that they have destroyed and are destroying hundreds of thousands of lives and do not know it and do not want to know it. One can be, indeed, one must strive to become tough and philosophical concerning destruction and death. For this is what most of mankind has been best at since we've heard of man." But remember, most of mankind, not all of mankind. "But it is not permissible that the authors of devastation should also be innocent. It is the innocence which constitutes the crime." Okay? So, Baldwin seems to say that one of the major difficulties in white people coming to terms with the real nature of racism in this country in particular, we're talking about this country, is that this is not just about recognition of, past mistakes, a past wrong social or political or economic order, but it is recognition that something foundational about how you think of yourself, how you think of your social and national identity needs to be shaken, needs to be questioned, and questioned very, very deeply. There is a very controversial, but I think it makes a lot of sense to me, common thread in James Baldwin's writings, and it is that, as he says, the category of Negroes do not exist in any other country. This is an American thing. What does he mean? I mean, I come from Europe. I've seen racism. Plenty. I grew up in Italy, in the south of Italy, where because it was extremely poor when I grew up. Obviously, there was no immigration. But the moment we had immigrants in South, so I had never seen anyone other than white people growing up, and you can think you are not racist when you have not been exposed to it. But the moment we started to have people coming from even neighboring Albania, who are just different nationality, but white people as well, you started to see xenophobia, and you started to see racism, like first quite understated and then growing exponentially to the point that the anti-immigration and racist political discourse has become a major factor since the 90s in Italy with the League, North League, etc. So there is racism. I lived in France for many years, 19 years, and France struck me coming from Italy as extremely racist. But the racism was, there's a different tinge, there is a different taste to the racism. And Baldwin affirms it, because Baldwin, as you know, lived in France for a number of years. And he says, no, there is racism in France, but his life was not dominated by it, was not defined by it in the same way as in this country. So he says, number 2, the American Negro is a unique creation. He has no counterpart anywhere and no predecessors. Color is not a human or personal, like we can add, as we know, a biological or, a reality. It doesn't have any foundation in science, any foundation in any other category than the political. It's a political reality. What does it mean by that? It's a category that it is created to exploit. It's a category that is created to take advantage of other people, okay? It is a fact, he adds, that every American Negro bears a name that originally belonged to the white man whose chattel he was. I'm called Baldwin because I was either sold by my African tribe or kidnapped out of it into the hands of a white Christian named Baldwin, who forced me to kneel at the foot of the cross. And what makes it, as I understand it, what makes Baldwin say that there is a unique situation in this country is because basically you have people who have been brought forcefully here, who grew up here and generation after generation have become part of this country. So they are not, he says at one point, they are not African, they are not Muslim, they are American, just like any other American. But they are forced to live in a country that does not want them. Because they remind, the white Christian majority of the white Christian population reminds them of something they don't want to come to terms with. He says, Negroes in this country, and Negroes do not, strictly or legally speaking, exist in any other, are taught really to despise themselves from the moment their eyes open on the world. This world is white and they are black. White people hold the power, which means they are that they are superior to blacks intrinsically, that is, God decreed it so, and the world has innumerable ways of making this difference known and felt and feared. Long before the Negro child perceives this difference, and even longer before he understands it, he has begun to react to it. He has begun to be controlled by it. And this is the theme of, or one of the themes of that struck me so much in To Another Country, right? A big, huge part also of The Fire Next Time is then the description of this claim of innocence and the unveiling of white people's complacency in the issue of racism. Okay? Number 11. Neither civilized reason nor Christian love would cause any of those people to treat you as presumably they wanted to be treated. Only the fear of your power to retaliate would cause them to do that, or to seem to do it, which was and is good enough. If you go to number 16, white Americans have contented themselves with gestures that are now described as tokenism. For hard example, white Americans congratulate themselves on the 1954 Supreme Court decision outlawing segregation in the schools. They suppose, in spite of the mountain of evidence that has since accumulated to the contrary, that this was proof of a change of heart, or as they like to say, progress. Had it been a matter of love or justice, the 1954 decision would surely have occurred sooner. Were it not for the realities of power in this difficult era, it might very well not have occurred yet. These have been dealt with, when they have been dealt with at all, out of necessity, and in political terms, anyway, necessity means concessions made in order to stay on the top. So basically, when you cannot do anything else other than make a concession, you do it in such a way that, of course, it is your initiative, you still have on the top because you grant something to someone else. So you are the benefactor in a sense. And you grant it in such a way that you retain the position on the top and you retain superiority. Baldwin is also quite uncompromising about even the myth of equality. He says basically, why would we want equality with white people? Why would we want access to the privilege they think they have? And the reason why he's critical of this, he says in one point, he says, why would we want to join a country that is burning? And what he means by this is that the whole way in which equality is framed is basically those who are in a position of power will say to you, I grant to you, or I pretend to grant to you, the privilege and the the superiority I have, or whatever, however you frame it. But this is done by people who are not aware of how compromised, how hypocritical, how delusional they are, for the reasons we said. So this pretension of innocence, so that there is a sense in which I don't want equality with you means I don't want to be part or don't want to be drawn into your delusion. What I want is really have access to whatever I consider dignity for me in my own terms, which is really one of the marks of what makes Baldwin so hard and so also necessary is the moral clarity he has. The way he doesn't leave anyone like unseated. He pushes everyone. And at the same time, what makes him so also weird, in a sense, so strange and so provoking, is the fact that everything is centered around love. So the core of his message is really that unless white people learn to love themselves and black people learn to love themselves, and we learn how to love each other, there is no other solution. So the solution is not a purely political solution, it's not a purely even economic solution. Of course, these are all part of the solution. But as long as they are framed in such a way that it is having access to white kind of equality with white, then the framing of the civil rights or whatever it is wrong. Okay, and there is no more baffling and no more, I think, provoking way of expressing this that in sentence 26, and I'd like to have a conversation about this really, because this is really one of the things that has made me think a lot. Number 26. White people need to become black. I submit then the racial tensions that menace Americans today have little to do with real antipathy. On the contrary, indeed, and are involved only symbolically with color. So we have established that color is a purely political category and it is the catalyst of something else. These tensions are rooted in the very same depths as those from which love springs or murder. And I think what he means by this is you wouldn't murder someone you didn't see as a menace to you, as an existential menace to you. You wouldn't murder someone you didn't feel threatened by. So if there is, and here we are not talking about just, moderate dislike and desire to, not to be bothered by something. We are talking about actively trying to suppress, in ways that have been as we know, the whole history, incredibly cruel. This, for Baldwin, testifies to something much, much more visceral, which is also akin to love, he seems to say. And that's the thing I really kind of want to wrap my mind around. The white man's unadmitted and apparently to him unspeakable private fears and longings are also projected onto the Negro. The only way he can be released from the Negro's tyrannical power over him is to consent, in effect, to become black himself. And he tries to explain what he means: to become a part of that suffering and dancing country that he now watches wistfully from the heights of his lonely power and, armed with spiritual travel's checks, visits surreptitiously after dark. How can one respect, let alone adopt, the values of a people who do not, at any level whatever, live the way they say they do or the way they say they should? I cannot accept the proposition that the 400-year travail of the American Negro should result merely in his attainment of the present level of American civilization, what I told you earlier. I'm far from convinced that being released from the African witch doctor was worthwhile if I am now, in order to support the moral contradictions and the spiritual aridity of my life, expected to become dependent on the American psychiatrist. It is a bargain I refuse. The only thing white people have that black people need or should want is power, and no one holds power forever. White people cannot, in generality, be taken as models of how to live. Rather, the white man is himself in sore need of new standards, which will release him from his confusion and place him once again in fruitful communion with the depths of his own being. Okay? There's a very then incredibly, really strong passage in this essay, number 27. This past, the Negro's past, of rope, fire, torture, castration, infanticide, rape, death and humiliation, fear by day and night, fear as deep as the marrow of the bone, doubt that he was worthy of life, since everyone around him denied it, sorrow for his women and for his kinfolk, for his children who needed his protection and whom he could not protect, rage, hatred and murder, hatred for white men so deep that it often turned against him and his own and made all love, all trust, all joy impossible. This past, this endless struggle to achieve and reveal and confirm a human identity, human authority, yet contains, for all its horror, something very beautiful. This is because, in order to save his life, he is forced to look beneath appearances, to take nothing for granted, to hear the meaning behind the words. If one continually surviving the worst that life can bring, one eventually ceases to be controlled by a fear of what life can bring. Whatever it brings must be borne. It demands great force and great cunning continually to assault the mighty and indifferent fortress of white supremacy, as Negroes in this country have done so long. It demands great spiritual resilience not to hate the hater whose foot is on your neck, and an even greater miracle of perception and charity not to teach your child to hate. The Negro boys and girls who are facing mobs today come out of a long line of improbable aristocrats, the only genuine aristocrats this country has produced. I say this country because their frame of reference was totally American. Basically, fear is a huge category in Baldwin's diagnosis of the situation. So, and he constantly points to the danger of being dominated by fear, of being shaped by fear, and even more so by hatred, because this self is basically destroys you. And what he seems to say here is that somehow, black people have resisted to be entirely dominated by that hatred. The reason being that they have perceived the extent to which delusional white men were about themselves. In a sense, there is a sense of almost pity for people who become so cruel out of fear and out of a desperate attempt to hide the truth about themselves, out the truth about how they are in the position where they are, hide how delusional it is, their kind of pretension of superiority. And the beauty I think it points to is this like clairvoyance, this ability to see something which is born out of suffering. I mean, even in small experience of suffering, we know that however unbearable that is, it often eventually helps us to see things we would not have seen before. So any kind of this kind of gigantic amount of suffering for him has produced this aristocracy, as he calls it. I mean, and you cannot not think about aristocracy when you think about the images of children, like the famous image of children going to school, after the desegregation and being hounded and accused by people. I went to Atlanta once. There's a museum of I can't remember the exact name, a new museum of racism. And one of the things they did was you could, with earphones, have a kind of immersive experience of how the child who went through the people who were shouting at her, trying to enter into the school, felt. Of course, I mean, this is obviously doesn't, it's purely a way of making you think about this. But even these exercises really help you to realize the immense strength that this has required. So the only genuine aristocrats this country has ever produced, he says. And the reason why he, and that's the last point I wanted to point out, is that the reason why he's so adamant in trying to warn against hatred and fear and point out all the stages in which, all the ways in which all the ways in which black people have managed to resist being at least swept over by this, is that this is, as I told you, and as it shows to another country, leads to destruction or self-destruction for the person. So, number 30, most Negroes cannot risk assuming that the humanity of white people is more real to them than their color. So it's self-explanatory. And this leads imperceptibly but inevitably to a state of mind in which, having long ago learned to expect the worst, one finds it very easy to believe the worst. The brutality with which Negroes are treated in this country simply cannot be overstated, however unwilling white men may be to hear it. And he says, this is one of the most powerful sentences to me of The Fire Next Time, this is why the most dangerous creation of any society is the man who has nothing to lose. The moment you create a situation in which there is no possible hope and no possible redemption, then you create something that potentially is going to destroy himself or herself and destroy society. And as you know, in The Fire Next Time, Baldwin talks about his experience with Christianity. He was a preacher for a while, and then he left Christianity because the preacher told him, if a white woman asks you to leave her place, your place on the bus, you must not do it. And then he says, a religion that preaches love for everyone and asks me not to love is hypocritical. So he left Christianity. And then he was exposed to black Muslim movements where, there was the demonization of the white. And he opposed that equally. And he explains this in number 32. I am concerned for the black people's dignity, for the health of their souls, and must oppose any attempt the Negro may make to do others what has been done to them. Because then they will reach equality. But you don't want that kind of equality, because there's an equality that really destroys you and makes you as dysfunctional as the people who have, to say the least, kind of oppressed you. Whoever debases others is debasing himself. Number 33. So I'm aware that this is just a kind of some probes into a treatise that it's immensely thought-provoking. But I thought that for Martin Luther King Day, it's important to have a sense, or to have a lack of the moral clarity which is needed to face, and also the level of self-questioning, the depth of self-questioning which is required to wade into an issue as fraught as the one of racism. And if a lot of the terms which apply to, or are described by Baldwin here seem anachronistic, because obviously the situation has changed. This was written in 1963. We all know very well how much they are actual, and the adaptations are needed, but they are basically as valid now as they were then. So this is the a little introduction. I don't know if you have any thought or any clarification or any question for clarification.
Yeah, I think that the race, every race have the same problem, though. But it's that like in Asia, people also like a class, the high class and the low class. It's always, the same color.
Yeah.
With the same color, but it's still there.
Yes. Yes. So there is there are ways. In fact, this is a treatise that I think, and I said that I think can bring can inspire or can be translated into other contexts, and yet at the same time, I think there is something absolutely unique about the character of racism in this country that should not be easily translated into other categories. Or other situations. But I agree that that this can clarify, can explain other status, particular class, etc.
I think there's I saw a documentary recently that talked about the caste system and how that's in different cultures, India for one. But I think what makes this country unique from my perspective is how hypocritical it is, and how very much the white patriarch grants things to people, women as well. And I think it was John Lennon who said the only thing worse than being female in this country is being black female. And the prejudice is still there.
Yes.
And it's still this American exceptionalism that I think is increasing these days. And
Yes.
I think Baldwin was very unique in understanding human nature and understanding that kind of hatred will cause you probably more harm than good. And, in some cases you just see this playing out over and over.
Over and over again, yes. Yeah, because it's not dealt with at the depth that it requires.
Writer,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And, his
Yeah.
books and his prose are,
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Please.
There's always been slavery in different cultures and historically, but I suppose what he points out is the unique situation in America, where the free labor class, whereas the slave class, were defined entirely by the color of their skin.
Yeah.
And it was almost too easy, and has been too easy for America and then the United States, and to see it that way and ingrain it into the system unconsciously.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes when I read Baldwin, I have there is almost a sense in which he talks about white people and black people being like a married couple or a family, and you cannot deny that you are a family because you are together. You live in the same house. The thriving of the one is conditioned by the thriving of the other. So this is why he was so adamantly opposed to any idea of the Black Muslim movement wanted to create a black nation. And he said, this is utopia. We live in the same house. And thinking that I will thrive if I separate myself from white people, besides not being possible, is just doesn't make any sense. So that, the only option we have is the option we resist more than anyone else, which is really learn how to love each other. But love not in the sentimental way, but love in the sense of accepting the depth of re-examination or redefinition of who I am, to the point of saying, white people have to become black, which I think it suggests something like, honestly I don't know, identification, understanding from inside. Probably the same level of understanding that black people have matured, at least to some level, of the nature of the cruelty, the white cruelty kind of unleashed on them, as being mad, as being like the signs of a disease. So that empathy, that sympathy, that's something that really helps you to see beyond, however hard this is, beyond the appearance. That's how I understand it. But this is certainly something I think needs it's endlessly generative to think about.
Like a mirror.
Somehow, yeah, somehow.
It's a very dark vision.
Valerio?
For me personally,
Yeah.
I'm first time here. I'm originally from Ukraine.
Yeah.
It's my very first time. As I said, that is absolutely fantastic that we're talking about it nowadays, and this lesson was for me absolutely great because it's crucially important to talk about it and support each other, no matter like what religion you are or what race. Because in my country, there is not a such thing as racism or such a different things, because let's say that my people more want to try to understand what is a different country came from, to understand the culture, and it's extremely important to talk about it, in our days also, and spread this in a mass to have measured understanding instead of the criticism or judgment, which is coming from more now non-logical idea, it's like the people who can't understand or don't have a vision of something, they're judging, and this is kind of protection of the brain, and the more we're talking about it, and the more society will have clear understanding, and this is about everything, and it's wonderful that you guys talking here about it, and it's great, it's fantastic.
Thank you. Yes, yes. Solomon, yeah.
I've never heard John Meacham mention this, I'm not sure. But is the statues of Martin Luther King Jr. and Mary McLeod Bethune, are they still in the bell tower at this church, or have they been removed?
Oh, there are, yes, on the outside some of the statues on the facade of the church. There are there are 3 or 4 statues of Martin Luther King is one of them, and I don't know if it is also on the rear rados. Yeah. But that's to be. If you ask me, that's what Baldwin calls tokenism. You put a statue and you think you have dealt with the problem somehow. It's a better than nothing, but it's not that really, other than as a reminder, really makes a difference. Is how the congregation really deals with privilege and status, and how much really asks itself the hard questions. Let's not forget that Christianity is one of the main targets of Baldwin's kind of criticism, but in a way that to me points to what I hope is the reality of Christianity. So what he's denouncing is a Christianity that is used on both sides as in his understanding as a way of cementing and deepening the distrust and the division, I'm really considering the reading group for Lent. I'd like to I was thinking of taking another book, but as part of the theme of the year, which is the Eucharist as an antidote to idolatry, and there is no form of idolatry more kind of serious than racism, take probably 1 or 2 essays by Baldwin and keep thinking and reflecting on it, because I think this is really this is the kind of exercise that I think is needed. A statue is not, doesn't do that, to think deeply about these issues. We have time for 1 or 2 more questions. We have or observations, please.
Yeah, I would love to hear some of your thoughts about Baldwin's critique of the church. I think Baldwin is my favorite author, and one of the things that really stands out to me about him is how, in many respects, he is shaped by the church, especially as a young man, as a preacher. And then eventually he goes on to leave the church, and he kind of identifies that there's not one church in America. There's a white church, there's a black church, and he says that the most segregated hour in America is noon on Sunday.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm curious from your perspective, what sort of implications does Baldwin's work have on us as the church? How should we? What does it mean to be part of the church in light of Baldwin's critique of the church?
Certainly asking ourselves the question why it is so, we think we are Christian in this country, let's say, not so just St. Thomas a chair, we think we are Christian, and yet, our congregations, by and large, are still, defined along racial boundaries. And how is it? What is the reason for that? So already acknowledging this and questioning ourselves about this is very, very important. But then I think that he didn't believe that Christianity has been used so heavily to justify, to support the racial division and exploitation. So I think his main criticism is how malleable Christianity, how liable Christianity is to be exploited for ideological reasons. And there are so many examples in history. And it's under our eyes today. We see how Christianity now today is a major kind of force behind the most totalitarian instincts. So I think that this is his main criticism. Probably also is that Christianity very easily is part of the claim of innocence. So I'm a Christian and I'm innocent, which you reach too easily. And this is why he says, okay, let's kind of get rid altogether of this patch that gives you this alibi or this pretension of innocence, and let's look into the issue straight, without any validation from God or from religion and anything else. So I see his point, and yet I think that what he's trying to say from a Christian viewpoint is a provocation for Christianity to go to its roots and to ask itself these questions. So yes, Christianity is extremely malleable. The Bible can be used to say everything at the contrary of everything has been used to justify racism, slavery, homophobia, name it. But if you look deeper, I think it really goes exactly in the direction of what Baldwin is asking us to do. So I think it's good to be exposed and to hear his criticism, just to verify the extent to which our practice of Christianity, can easily become hypocritical. We need these kind of denunciations. I think that when people like Nietzsche, for instance, even Schopenhauer, these really incredibly hard critics of Christianity help Christianity, because usually what they point to is the is the illnesses of the deviations of what the Christian message should be. Okay, so I know this is deeply unsatisfactory, but and leaves us with more questions than. But I really hope to pursue the conversation in the Lent reading group. I'm definitely going to do choose Baldwin, and we'll see what comes out of it. But thank you so much for having been here today. Thank you. Thank you. Hi, how are you? Sorry. Hi, I'm Luigi. What's your name?
I'm Effie.
Effie, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you for coming today.
Thank
Yes,
you.
yeah.
My daughter is in the Noble.
Noble Singers. Okay,
yeah.
okay, yes,
And
yeah.
We've been here for like 10 months.
Okay.
No, a year now. No,
Yes.
a year in February.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
I just
yes.
started coming up here when she goes.
When
up
she goes
for-
to